Welcome to Looking for the Ocean, where we watch everything Pixar has ever made. I'm Danny Vincent, and as always, I'm joined by Mark Young. And with us today is Luke Hayden.
How's it going, everyone?
Luke, how are you? What's your connection to Danny?
So Danny and I are friends. We go all the way back to middle school youth group. And I don't know if this is lore to the show, but I was a part of Danny's movie club way back in the day.
Yes, we talked about it when Michaela was on, about the famous Contagion Lion King fight.
Oh, that same movie club? You were in that?
So Mark, to clarify, because I think Mark might be a little confused, because we didn't go to the same school. The club that me and Michaela destroyed was Cinema Club. Danny's movie club was a Facebook group that we used throughout middle school and high school to just organize like groups of 10 or 15 of us to go to movies.
Yes.
I got
Which
you.
also had some drama go on at one point.
I just had an intense memory of what happened the month before we saw Cars 2, which was when we saw Green Lantern. And getting very annoyed with someone. I don't remember if it was you or your brother brought him, but I was very annoyed with whoever it was.
I forgot that was before Cars 2. Yeah, no, Drew brought him.
Okay.
He's actually pretty cool now, that guy is. But yeah, he really enjoyed Green Lantern and did the whole actually thing the entire time, as the rest of us were like, not sure that was very good.
He's like, you just don't understand the character. And it was like, I don't really care if I understand the character or not. I don't understand who Thor is, and I enjoyed that. I don't...
So, Luke, what's your connection to Pixar?
I remember watching a lot of Pixar growing up, particularly like Toy Story, but the one that takes the cake has to be The Incredibles. I remember my brother and I, the day that The Incredibles came out on DVD, we made our mom drive us to Walmart before school and go buy the DVD. We got back and watched the Jack Attack short.
What's your opinion on Jack Attack? Do you like it? We are mixed here.
I've not seen it in probably like 10 years. I remember liking it as a kid, but eventually just kind of phasing out on like religiously watching it, you know? Probably I'm fine with it, but I think it overstays its welcome a little, I think, from hindsight. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you two are more educated, but I remember it kind of being the same gag kind of over and over.
I understand your hesitation to critique Jack Attack after it's been so long. I feel like a lot of these films, our reviews of them are really colored by watching them as children. Of course, Danny has a lot of great memories about that. And I'm just like, I just remember this as like a wash of feeling, and I can't analyze them as well as I can as something like Mission Impossible 4, which the episode we've already recorded for, which I had just watched for that episode, and it was like, I'm an adult. I know everything there is to know about this movie, so like, we're not going to judge you for your Jack Attack opinions.
Okay, hopefully I don't whip the internet into a furor and they come after me.
Everyone's going to go after you for your Jack takes.
Yeah.
Can I also mention the other connection that I know of you, Luke, is that you were the one who directed Danny's play?
Yes.
Can we have that on air? I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, so I teach middle school and high school choir. I'm in charge of directing the musicals. And at the middle school, they decided to add theater as a thing. Now, I don't have like much formal theater training, but I enjoy it and I'm trying my best. And the kids seem to enjoy it. And we've had a lot of success, and I asked Danny if he'd be interested in writing a play for us, and that was the fabulous Maria Kent and the Spirit of Adventure, which was, the fourth name we settled on?
It's definitely the best one, though. It definitely was the best option.
Yeah, all aboard the sea caboose.
A lot of bad titles were killed in the process of getting to a good one.
Yeah. And honestly, I did that and Sound of Music last year, and I enjoyed working on Maria Kent a lot more.
Nice. That's good to hear.
So you're dialed in with the youth, and you know what the kids like. Do they like Pixar?
I feel like to them, Pixar is less of a brand than it was for us, particularly with like the Disney Plusification of everything, where it's all just under one umbrella. Like, I don't really hear kids talking about Pixar as an entity. I might hear them talking about the movies, but I don't hear them talking about like, oh, I really like Pixar films. It's more so like, I like Disney movies, and Pixar is just Disney to them nowadays.
It's tragic. because Disney sucks and Pixar rules.
Yeah. You mean Pixar rules and Disney drools?
Yeah. Do your kids love Encanto? Do they demand to only sing Encanto?
Actually, I think I've escaped showing Encanto this year.
Okay, good.
But we did watch Tangled.
Okay, but Tangled's good. Tangled and Moana are innocent.
We watched Tangled and Moana. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of Moana. My first time going to watch it, I got to the David Bowie crab and was like, not feeling this.
I think that's fair.
After rewatching it, it's like fine.
I just remember I remember coming home drunk one night in college and putting it on, just crying at it very late at night while I was eating Jimmy John's. I bring that up because Mark was definitely there, but he might have been asleep.
I feel like I was there, but like, why was I asleep in your house?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe we just came to my house to watch Moana, but it was like 4 a.m, so you fell asleep because it's a comfy couch.
4 a.m, and you were there. Wow, this is a perfect Cars episode.
You were there too.
It is as related to Cars as Cars 2 is.
All right, so Cars 2. Why are you here for Cars 2, Luke?
Wait. We have to finish. As great as a segue that would have been, we didn't ask.
Well, then why did you stop it? What is going on?
It's a Cars 2 desserts. Luke, when you think of Pixar, what's the first thing you think of? It's not Cars 2, I assume.
No. Like I said before, it's definitely The Incredibles, and in particular, it's the scene at the end of The Incredibles where the Underminer pops up, because I remember just being a kid, being like, when's Incredibles 2 coming out? And being just like desperately needing to know what happened after that the credits rolled on that one.
It really is fascinating. I always talk about this. It's fascinating how The Incredibles 2 is probably the most wanted sequel ever, like at least in our lifetime. And then when it finally came out, it just kind of completely was like gone from memory. And it was like, we need another Incredibles movie. It just was like, oh yeah, there's one that exists and it's fine. And I like The Incredibles too.
Yeah, I remember seeing it in theater, which like I very rarely go out to the theater. I probably have gone more in the past couple years than I did back then. And like going and watching it, being super satisfied, and then never having any desire to ever go see it again or ever watch it again. It's like it scratched the itch. It's almost as if like the sequel was better in my brain than it was on the screen, you know?
Yeah. Now, before we move on, Mark has to ask his question that he asks all of our guests.
Yeah, Luke, have you seen Turning Red?
I have not seen Turning Red. My girlfriend texted me like a month or two ago and was like, hey, this Turning Red movie's really good. We should watch it. I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds fun. And then we never watched it. I just find it really hard most of the time to commit to watching movies. Anything over an hour just feels like so long. And maybe I'm just like ADHD or something to like sit down and commit to that. I have to like, oh no, I need to like work on this or do that or sit and do nothing. I don't know. I just find it hard to commit to a movie.
I'm sure you guys are aware. I actually think I texted Luke about it. Maybe I didn't. The weather this past week in Chicago has been terrible. Not because of the weather, but because we've had the smoke from the Canadian wildfires.
Yeah, we got that down here too.
Yeah, so since I still work at the camp, it was like on Tuesday through Thursday, we couldn't take them outside at all because of how bad the air quality was. On Thursday, our schedule was we were supposed to go to a theme park. It got canceled. Well, it got postponed, which is good. If it got canceled, it would have been much harder to deal with. Telling kids, we'll go in a couple of weeks is what you're going, oh yeah, we're not going there at all, you know? Instead, we took the kids to see Mario, which is this whole thing I could get into about like why was it when we saw Mario and not Little Mermaid or whatever. But my actual story here is that on the way back, one of my coworkers was like, I really liked it. I hadn't seen it yet. I really liked it. It was really long though. And I go, that movie is 85 minutes with credits. It's by far the shortest movie you've seen probably in the last year or so. It's not too long. It's just that it sucks. You just think it's good, but you thinking it's long means you actually hated it. And they're like, okay, if it was 85 minutes, yeah, you're right. It probably was pretty bad.
You see, I miss, like, I remember as a kid, the average movie length was like right around 90 minutes. But everything's just creeping up to like 2 hours now. I feel like the 90-minute movie is something that's just dying and no one knows how to really do. Or maybe that's just me waxing poetic about a past that never existed.
I don't know. This summer I've been very weird about it because I think, yes, I haven't seen the new Indiana Jones yet. That movie's 2.5 hours long, which is ridiculous because every Indiana Jones movie before it is 2 hours long, like on the dot. I don't know. My other thing this summer has been I've been defending Spider-Verse 2 runtime because, A, it's not enough, because I think I've said it I don't know if I said it here before, but one of my friends was like, I can't, like, whatever happened to 90-minute movies when I told him, like, Spider-Verse 2 was 2 hours and 20 minutes? I'm like, well, I mean, the animation art form is based around the 90-minute thing, so you can't really complain that this movie's trying for something different, because it's the first of its kind to do it. But yeah, sure, be mad about Guardians 3 being 2.5 hours long. That's valid, you know?
And again, I think one time you and I discussed this, Danny, of like, if a movie earns it, it's good. If it doesn't earn it, it's just a slog. And I feel like so many movies saw, like, you know, the Infinity War movies, which I enjoyed, and they're like, that's the ticket. We have to go bigger, and that equals more success. And they just try to do that, and it's just completely unnecessary. You can tell most stories a lot more efficiently, I feel.
Do you know what movie is told very efficiently?
What movie is that?
Cars 2!
Vroom, 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 vroom!
Cars
We did
2.
it! We made it to Cars 2! Alright, Cars 2. Summer 2011. Comes out. It completely annihilates Pixar's reputation the second it's released. No longer are they the no failure studio. They released a movie that I believe has around 38% on Rotten Tomatoes when it first released. I think it's gone down to 32% on Rotten Tomatoes since then. No, it's actually up to 40% now. Good job, Cars 2. You've been moving on up. People like me have been reclaiming it for a while, I guess.
I don't know. I'm glad that you're here to reclaim it. I've got to say I might be on the other team. Although I do think it's weird that this movie, like you said, like destroyed the reputation of Pixar or whatever, because we've been watching Mater's Tall Tales, and this is a feature-length Mater's Tall Tale. Like, we've been expecting this, I feel like. That's why I watched this twice before we came on here, and on my first watch, I was pretty open to it because I was just like, this is the same thing I've been watching for like a few months now. This is not news to me that the Cars universe is capable of this, but I guess other people weren't watching television and they were like, what's going on here?
The people didn't do the research before going to see Cars 2.
They didn't know the deep lore.
I mean, I also think that potentially the world of Cars allows for something like Cars 2 to exist even from the first movie, but we'll get into that in a little bit.
Cars 2 is pretty much announced as soon as Disney buys Pixar, essentially. It's like, we're putting in some sequels in production. Toy Story 3 and Cars 2. Originally, Brad Lewis is supposed to direct it, but a year before release, he gets kicked off the project to be put as the co-director, with John Lasseter being like, only I can make a Cars sequel. I'm the only person who understands this property. Wikipedia specially notes that this is his last outing as a director of a Pixar movie to date. Considering he's been ousted from the studio, I highly doubt he will ever come back to direct another Pixar movie. Michael Giacchino does the score, replacing Randy Newman. Imagining a Randy Newman score for this movie feels crazy. The important thing I actually did want to mention historically is, you know, we talk about how this is like destroyed Pixar's reputation, but it's the highest grossing film of the Cars trilogy worldwide. It did do less in the US, though, than the original.
As a sequel.
Well, not necessarily. It's because it's a sequel that's worldwide, so it had worldwide appeal. It opens to $66 million, which is about the range of what Pixar movies are doing around then, right? I think it might, I mean, not as much as Toy Story 3, because Toy Story 3 was a special case. But it's about, like, you know, like what Up, Ratatouille, WALL-E did. It then drops 60% the following weekend, which is the July 4 weekend. So it drops 60% on a holiday weekend. Normally animated movies drop 45% without a holiday weekend. That is how toxic people were at the Cars 2. I believe this is also a groundbreaker because if I remember right, yeah, this is the first Pixar movie since the establishment of the Best Animated Feature category at the Oscars not to get nominated for Best Animated Feature at the Oscars.
A groundbreaker.
I also want to point out, right before we talk about the movie itself, is that Wikipedia feels the need to let you know that if you search Cars 2, the first result is the film. If you want to see the video game, go to Cars 2, the video game. I feel like most people are not trying to get to the video game first.
I do remember growing up and multiple friends having the Cars video game, playing a lot of that Cars video game back in the day. The first one, not the second one, but...
Well, yeah, they were like, I think remember they were like fairly, like, you know, licensed game was always a crapshoot growing up, but the Cars games were at least like just racing games, you know, it's kind of hard to mess that up.
So where were we when we first saw Cars 2? I suppose I doubt that it was this horrible July 4th weekend, but when were we seeing Cars 2? Mine's not super exciting because I was not allowed to watch it until we recorded this episode, so I leave that to
Yeah,
you guys.
I didn't let him watch it before. I was like, I want your raw Cars 2 takes. Now, I can actually find exactly when I first saw it because I joined a website, not Letterboxd, a different website where I started keeping track of my movies in 2011. And then I imported all that to Letterboxd a couple years ago. So let me see when I first saw Cars 2. We saw it on August 2nd, because I saw it with Luke at the Portage 16 IMAX on August 2nd, 2011. So very late into its run did we finally get around to seeing Cars 2.
I mean, can you blame us for not rushing, not racing to go see Cars 2?
If I remember right, Cars 2 is kind of like another 2011 movie, Kung Fu Panda 2, where I've had these long-running streaks for both Pixar and DreamWorks where I've seen every one of their movies in theaters. And it was one of those things where it was like, both of them I saw like in the last week they were available because I was like, I want to keep this streak running. And Cars 2, you know, we got it in under the wire right before I think the theater did literally drop. I think this was like a Tuesday probably, and I think the theater dropped it on the Friday.
Yeah.
What was the theater like when you were in there? Were there a lot of people?
It was the place to be most of the time, but it was also, if it was a Tuesday or whatnot, it would have been pretty low.
Also, if it was Cars 2, in the last week Cars 2 was out on like a Tuesday afternoon. I'm pretty sure it was just the four of us, because my friend Matt was with us too, and I think it's the one time you ever met Matt. I'm actually looking at, I remember, because for me this was special, because you didn't go to the other one, but I rushed to see Cars 2, and I rushed to see the 2011 Winnie the Pooh movie in the same week, because the Winnie the Pooh movie had already left Portage, and I went to go see it at Cinemark.
Yeah, I remember you really liking the Winnie the Pooh back then.
Another movie, you know, we were just talking about how movies are too long. Winnie the Pooh, 63 minutes with credits. I think that one, well, it bombed for two reasons. One, they opened up against Harry Potter, which, like, the final Harry Potter movie, so, like, no one wanted to see it when that was the other option. But also, when you see the runtime is 63 minutes, you're just kind of like, well, I'll just wait then, because why would I spend movie theater prices for an hour of entertainment? But I remember seeing Cars 2, yeah, that theater. I think it was just that wasn't that bad type of thing.
Yeah, I remember really enjoying the Victor Hugo line, because I had just finished reading Les Mis or something like that, or as in the process of it.
I do see that my Cars 2 review on this is my imported review from 2011, is just, Cars was surprisingly violent for a movie about animated talking cars going on a world tour. It is better than the original, though. So I've always been of the opinion that Cars 2 is an improvement on the first film. An opinion I still have on this rewatch.
So I'm not familiar with the deep lore here, but does this movie introduce death to the Cars universe? Because we, like, pretty explicitly see people, like, die, like, horribly, get crushed into a little cube. That's pretty graphic, isn't it?
I do think it's the first on-screen death in Cars. I think, even in the Mater shorts, I don't know if there's an on-screen death.
There's a lot of death in this movie. It's a very violent film. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
They're, like, blowing everyone up and, like, shooting guns. Like, I was just like, they're, like, dead. Like, there's no coming back from that. It's like trying to keep a body count for The Incredibles.
I think, in a way, this is more shocking than The Incredibles, because in The Incredibles, I feel like even, like, at the time I saw Incredibles, granted, I was 9 when I saw Incredibles, I was 16 when I saw Cars 2. When I saw Incredibles, you know, yes, there's all that death, but all of it's, like, they punch someone and the thing explodes. You don't see, like, the body. And this, it's like, you just see them explode and their bodies just lay there. Or, like, the one I was thinking of was specifically, I think it's in the Japan sequence when Finn McMichael's fighting those guys and he, like, smashes them twice with an elevator and their lifeless bodies just stay there. And it's like, great. I love this. This is amazing. Also, Cars 2 is rated G. I feel like that's something that we also need to specify whenever we talk about the violence in this movie. This is G. It's not even PG.
I do think that the bathroom fight between the American and the thugs is one of the more, like, violent things that I've seen because of the way they shot it. The Finn McMissile scene with them in Japan is kind of goofy because he's doing kung fu, and then there's, like, the end fight, which is just ridiculous.
The ending of this movie is one of my favorite things. I'm just laughing hysterically throughout the whole thing.
But the bathroom fight is shot in such, it's kind of a good fight scene. You really, like feel the blows when they're just like ramming him into the wall.
Yeah, it does have a good like kinetic energy to it.
And I guess we should talk a little bit about like the overview of this film so people can kind of picture what we're talking about when.
So Cars 2 follows up the original Cars, which is about a man learning the finer things in life to just relax in the small town in the southwest of America. So tell us what Cars 2 is about, Mark.
Well, Cars 2 is about Lightning McQueen being challenged to compete in a World Grand Prix, and it's kind of convoluted, but basically the movie follows Lightning competing in this World Grand Prix in different locations in Japan and Italy and then in the UK. And then the side story, which is kind of the main story, is that Mater accompanies Lightning on this Grand Prix, and of course Mater is actually the reason that he becomes part of the Grand Prix through shenanigans. Mater is mistaken for an American spy by British spy cars, and they try to get his help figuring out who is sabotaging the racers who are competing in the Grand Prix. And yeah, there's this whole convoluted plot with a billionaire who's funding the race, and he's making all the cars use this oil, use this gas which reacts to electromagnetic pulses that the evil cars are using. But it's kind of like Speed Racer, where the whole race is a sham because it's meant to discredit the use of this all-natural gasoline instead of like normal gasoline. But then that's kind of weird because it's not actually like anti-environmentalist. It's just because the lemon, like these cars,
these cars that are technically like they are built poorly. Like these are. I feel like sick, disabled, coded cars are actually the villains of this movie.
Well, we can get into that because I don't actually think that's true. It's said, but it's not actually like part of the movie. That's actually kind of an interesting thing. But basically, they want to discredit this all-natural fuel source because they own offshore oil wells. Like, not because they actually need it. Like, it's not related to them being poorly made cars. They just own it. So they're trying to get more money.
And it's not even like, we're never told, like, they hate the race cars. It's just like, now let's just target the race cars because we'll make more, it's good publicity. None of these dots are ever connected. It's great.
Well, that's something that I really didn't understand, even on both watches. I had to even look up, like, what these models of cars were. So all of the bad guy cars are lemons, and they're famous lemons.
Which is, again, really funny, because this movie expects you to be aware of this going into it. Yeah. Like, Mater explains it to you, but it's also like, yeah, of course that these cars are bad cars. It's like...
Yeah, it's always a joke whenever he's like, oh man, you're a gremlin, and you're a pacer, and we're supposed to be like, oh, all right. And I think, like, if you grew up at a certain... Like, I think these were pretty well-known cars, so maybe you, like, get that, but I don't know. The problem that I have with the lemon cars is that they just look like normal cars in the Cars universe. Like, they're based on cars which look silly in the real world, but in the world of Cars, where every car looks weird because they're animated cars, they don't look like poorly made vehicles. They just look like everybody else. And they're never shown braking except for the main bad guy who just has engine trouble and is like oil's leaking. But like, I just feel like that was a characterization miss. Because they're like evil thugs, and you could have like given them like a fake eye, or they're like, you know, they're like limping, or they're like, I don't know, they're just, you could have done a lot of like crazy physical things with these guys to make them like more fun bad guys who, you know, historically have always been, you know, air quotes, like deformed in some way, and that's why they're evil or whatever. But that's something that could have been explored, and it wasn't, and I'm just frustrated by that. So that's thing one on my list of what's going on.
Before we continue, I realize this. You can tell that I'm very pro Cars 2, and Mark seems to be pretty anti. Luke, where do you fall in the Cars 2 quality scale?
I think I like it, kind of. I think it's fun, it's ridiculous, and I like that about it. Did I enjoy watching it? Yes. Do I think that it is what Cars 2 should have been? Not really. I'm a little confused by it. But I also genuinely do love Cats 2019.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
Taylor Swift is great in it. What can I say?
I was hoping she had used that as a surprise song. McCavity. Imagine.
And then my high schoolers actually love like the original Cats, the 90s recording we've watched. You know, it's just one of those things where you ask why. I've really tried showing them the good one. The last great thing we as a society made before it all went down the tubes.
But so, Luke, do you have an overall like assessment of Cars 2? Because I feel like, I mean, for me anyway, I feel like I have a summary of why this movie fails for me. Maybe that would be interesting to like get out of the way now, and then the rest of the podcast can be us like defending our take or whatever.
I kind of feel like it was an idea that they just didn't execute as well as they might have been able to. Like, I feel like a lot of the character drama was just way too simple. And, like, I know it's not, like, supposed to be the most complicated, nuanced movie, but, like, I just feel like the whole arc between Lightning and Mater is just too cliche to really work. And I found myself honestly just feeling more embarrassed for Lightning McQueen than like genuinely feeling bad for Mater. You know what I mean?
My basic thesis on this film has always been it's good because it is bad in a way. It is accidental self-parody of Pixar, where if you look at the life lesson being taught here, it is one of the worst possible. It's said, the lesson is said to be, you know, the typical animated movie, be yourself. But if you really look at what's going on in this movie, that's not what the message is at all. It's,
no.
Hey, if your friend is like really holding you back, you need to meet them on their level of that, and you need to stay with them and not worry about it. You know, like, because Mater does constantly like ruin Lightning McQueen's career for very obvious, like, the moments I laugh in this movie the most are just like things that aren't even supposed to be jokes. Like, the thing I was laughing so hard at was in the Japan sequence when he's just on the line going like, "Hey, you need to go. You want me to go outside?" And Lightning's like, "What? Okay." And Lightning just an obviously dumb decision to let the other guy pass.
Yeah. It's also like, couldn't he have been on a different radio channel or something?
Exactly. Everyone in this movie is an idiot, which is why I really like it. There's not a single smart person in this movie.
Also, in the past couple years, I've gotten into Formula One, and let me just tell you, I have so many comments about just like the races themselves and how those work. I was very confused for most of them.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad about that, because of course I know that it's like all fake, and they're just gonna be like, whoever comes in first finishes, and that's it. It's not like how races actually work. But I'm glad that we have you here, because I have that like nagging thing in my brain, but I can't speak to it.
Okay, yeah, and like this is my first season I've been watching, but I've been like watching cycling YouTube for way longer. Did I say cycling? I meant Formula One. I've been watching both. So, like, I know some of the skinny, but it's really interesting. Do you want me to get into that now, or do you want to keep moving on something else?
Well, we can get into it later about, like, maybe specific parts of the movie, because I also wanted to say that I really agree with you, Luke, about your take that I feel like I take this movie on its own terms, and on its own terms, it does not work. I'm really intrigued by, Danny, you saying that it's like a parody of Pixar lessons. I feel like that is the best defense of the film. But I'm just like, if these weren't Cars, it would be kind of a dull spy movie.
But since it is Cars, it's hilarious because it's this graphically violent G-rated film.
Like I already said, I also don't think the car humor is there as much as it could be. It doesn't work for me as a Cars movie or a spy movie or as a racing movie, really.
I argue that the humor of this movie comes not from them being Cars, but comes from the conflict of them being Cars. Like, if this was a normal spy movie, would Mater stupidly eating wasabi be funny? No.
Yes. because of a lot, because I thought about this too. I think it is a pretty common trope in like comedy spy movies for there to be this mistaken identity, and you have this bumbling idiot like, oh, he is the best spy in the world.
I don't know. To me, the only reason it's funny is because it's a car that's asking for pistachio ice cream and it being wasabi. Because there's so many layers to this, makes no sense that it just becomes hysterical to me. Whereas otherwise, I feel like in a normal like North by Northwest-esque parody, it would just be, oh, this is a Larry the Cable Guy being stupid and asking for wasabi ice cream. That wouldn't be funny. But since it's a car doing it, it's hilarious.
I feel that actually. That would not be a compelling joke if he was Larry the Cable Guy. But also, I mean, I would have no patience for this movie if it wasn't a Cars movie. I just don't think them being Cars like flips it into being good for me. Like I guess I see what you mean. Like there is that level of humor, but I want more of it. I don't know.
Or like when we go to the bathroom, right? And there are sinks. I texted you during it. It's like, what are the sinks? why do they have sinks? They're not good. Mater doesn't wash his hands with his tires when he leaves. They're just there.
Well, I do just think that like this movie has slow parts too, and those suck.
Like what? Tell me a slow part. I can probably find something funny to find out of it.
I think that when they're in the plane and then the train talking about like that picture of the broken motor is very confusing and also just kind of like dull. And I mean also like Luke, you already said this. I find the Mater Lightning interactions just to be so frustrating. A really good example of this is when Lightning receives the letter from Mater saying
how did he write it?
Home.
How did Mater write the letter?
Well, it's, of course, how did he write the letter? It's like it should be honestly more ridiculous, but there's something about that scene about the way they block it where they have all those cars in a line and there's no like history of that moment. It's not like Lightning is like he could be like finding the letter and like, oh, now he's like showing it to Guido and oh, Fillmore was having a drink in the background. He didn't know what was going on, but now we're going to like go over and show it to Fillmore. And there's nothing in that scene. It's just like this static moment of them like reading a letter. And maybe that's not the exact complaint I had about why I found it dull before. This is kind of a different complaint about dullness. But then the same thing. It's just, I just don't think the craft is there.
Oh, the craft isn't there. Don't worry. I agree with you that this movie has very little, like, Pixar story craft. That's why I kind of like it. It's another reason it's appealing to me is, like, it's a failure. Like, that is appealing, is that this is a movie that comes from the studio that can never fail. And then this comes out, and you're like, how did this get past them? Like, how does this push out? And everyone's like, this will work fine. Like, it just makes no sense. One thing I think about the movie and about the Lightning and Mater stuff, and this kind of goes along with it's a parody of life lessons, is that, this story where it's like, sometimes you need to be there for your friends. You can't be too mean to them. I think there's a story here, right, of being embarrassed of your friends group when you're a different friend group. I think that's a very real thing that people always deal with, right? Where it's like, yeah. The thing is, it's being told from the perspective of Mater, not the person who's trying to discard Mater. Ergo, Lightning always comes off as terrible in the story, but also because of how bad Mater is being, he also, like, they're trying to make him seem reasonable. You know what I mean? Like, they're playing both sides here because the movie has to be from Mater's perspective. But in order to make Lightning's arc work, you know what I'm saying, right? It's kind of hard to explain. I
get what you mean. It's kind of because of the twin plots, and neither one really becomes the main plot. It's hard for there to be a definitive Pixar lesson. I
think the lesson, though, is meant to be like from Mater's perspective. It's supposed to be don't be ashamed of who you are. You're great anyway. And I think it's a really bad lesson, considering how often in the first act Mater does ruin things for everyone. And it's just because he's not paying attention. It's nothing to do with like his decisions. It's just he's not being he's not stepping up for Lightning when Lightning's asking him to step up. But him being asked to step up is being treated as you're trying to change him. It's like, but you're not. You're just letting him know this is your professional life and you would like him to be there for you. Like you want to bring him along for the ride, but if you can't keep up, it's my professional life. We can still be friends at home. But that's a bad thing, which is really funny.
It could have been great, I don't have a problem with this beat because I do feel like it's a spy movie, it's a racing movie, and these are both good genres. And I even think that, like, having there be this main race with a mystery in the background, again, this is what Speed Racer is. And you can complain about Speed Racer. I feel like Speed Racer, craft-wise, like, the craft of Speed Racer really elevates it. But, like, why isn't that here for Cars 2? Like, why isn't there enough spectacle for me to overlook things like Lightning McQueen being like, no, Mater, I was wrong, you were right, and I'm telling you this in 3 sentences at the end of the movie.
Can we talk about the best moment of this movie, which I've referred to before multiple times whenever I talk about this movie, which is the climax of this movie, which has Mater has a bomb strapped to his nose. And he's like, run away, I have a bomb. And then we get a very long, uninterrupted tape of Lightning going, yeah, Mater, you are the bomb. You always were the bomb, and you're always going to be the bomb. I'm sorry I missed that. It's just, everything wrong with that movie is like, this movie is summed up in that exchange, which is so bad that I just can't help but like laugh hysterically every time I watch this movie when it happens.
The stakes felt lower than the Marianas Trench at that point. It's like they are going to get this bomb taken care of. Like, it just felt so low and so choreographed. Like, no, you're the bomb. Like, I don't know. I was honestly losing interest through that part of the movie. It was just so like, okay, I know the rest of this.
But see, I think that's when the movie becomes the most farcical, because that is when the plot lines finally intersect and you realize just how different movies they were. Because the lightning plot, even though, yeah, we always cut back to it during these Mater scenes, the second it's like, oh, Mater's on the track of a rocket and the cameras are following him, we're hearing the car commentators being like, there's a tow truck on the track. He can really drive backwards well. It's like, wow, none of this really does work when we put it on one big jumble.
Also, the fact that Mater, a completely unaerodynamic tow truck, was able to catch a Formula One car while driving in reverse.
He had a rocket,
and towing a stock car. I don't even think he had the rocket at that point. I think he was still like driving in reverse. Maybe I'm misremembering it.
But even if he didn't, the movie's so dumb. So it's just like, okay, sure. Like, and then like the climax of the movie literally being like Mater threatening, walking up to the Queen, being like, "Hey, I have a bomb on me that's gonna go off in a minute." It's just like, this is amazing. Like, this is so dumb.
It's one of those like, is that just because we're in England that they do that, or like why did they decide let's put the Queen of England in this?
And also, isn't like William also there too? Like, very specifically, it's like he's like, Grandma, we really should get going, and it's like, okay, great. I'm glad he was there.
I even think that the globe-trottingness of it is like a fine idea for a sequel. Like, why don't you meet the Queen? Whatever.
Yeah, like a global Grand Prix series, like, checks out. Like, good enough as a premise, but yeah, it's this like you said, it's not committing to really anything too deeply, emotionally, or like the spy stuff. If you're going to do that, just like go all in on it. Or if you're going to do the character drama, it's just so much like in the middle of everything.
I also feel like there's just a joke of having Michael Caine be like the person doing all this, like voice act, like they didn't even like get like a British like Daniel Craig type of age. They're like, no, let's get Michael Caine. He'll be fine for a James Bond character. Well, in the time, like this came out like a year before The Dark Knight Rises. This is like when Michael Caine is like old in the eyes of the public, and his voice is so recognizable. It's like, yeah, he's in his prime spy car.
Well, he was in The Italian Job, which is a great car movie, so maybe that had something to do with it. It's funny, too, because this is one of the few Pixar movies where I really dislike the voice performances. Like, they seem really checked out.
Owen Wilson had a moment in this. I was so really, like, thrown off by what he was doing. I think it was, like, when he was, like, kicking Mater out, and it's just like, I don't know he's like, Mater, you're useless, or something. Like, it's so intense, and it's like, what is going on here? What is Owen Wilson doing? He shouldn't be giving it this much of a commitment. This line doesn't work, and he should know it.
There is one moment that Michael Caine does. The one Michael Caine line reading that I really like is when Mater is disguised as Ivan. And I don't know, I actually think there's so many things in here that are like, but just, they're funny concepts, but there's some part of them that is frustratingly executed. Like when he's disguised as Ivan and he's describing a bad guy based on his heads up display. So he's like saying all of his aliases and where he's wanted, and then they're like, oh man, this is a scary guy. Like, there you go. But like Holly showing up in his view screen kind of like breaks the tempo of that for me.
That threw me off too.
And it's like, why isn't she just over audio? I don't know where that came from. That's kind of something else. But oh, I remember, because it's in that moment Michael Caine has the line where he says he's so good, and that is the most that I ever believed anything Michael Caine was saying, because of the way he delivered that line. It's so pleasant.
I think if there's a good voice performance, and it's probably Thomas Kretschmann as the professor. I think he understood the job and got paid.
He could have been more German, honestly.
Yeah, he was
If you want to call Thomas Kretschmann and be like, hey, be more German, I guess.
I mean, I think we wanted a Colonel Kurtz. I meant Colonel Klink. Like, that's who we think of when we think of, like, evil German scientists. This goes back to what I was saying about the thugs, is it's like, look, man, you've got thugs, you got an evil German scientist, you've already, walked yourself halfway there. You just need to step over that line and commit to it a little bit more, and then this will be joyous,
What is your guys' opinion on John Turturro's only appearance in the Pixar canon?
Fantastic. My favorite Cars villain.
Yes.
He knows what to do.
He's okay.
Why do you think he's just okay? Is it because this is kind of like loud John Turturro performance? And
yeah, that's basically it. It's like, I don't find him compelling as a spy plot. A real good twist would have revealed him to be the mastermind behind it all.
Yeah, and not the...
That would have been funny.
It's Miles Axelrod from the moment that he's the one next to Mater when the oil leak happens. That's so frustrating that, like, the movie can't just, like, bury it one layer deeper, so it's, like, not him somehow. I don't know. That just seems like a really kind of blunt move for me. In a movie which is kind of hard to follow for all of the other twists and turns, I wish that part were not so obvious.
I like the epiphany scene in this, where it's just Mater floating in a black void, watching scenes from earlier in the movie. And he's just like, wow, yeah, that happened.
I have no recollection of like anything Lightning McQueen did in this movie that is of any note, particularly in the regards to driving. Probably part of that's because you have these secret agents that are doing all these absolutely incredible vehicular stunts that blow anything Lightning McQueen would do out of the water. So there's not any room for him to really shine at the going fast that he's good at.
And they also don't film the races as well as they do in 1 or 3, which I checked ahead to just to make sure that I was right about this. But the camera is so static in a lot of these races, and it's like the opening of Cars 1 like goes pretty hard. I don't know why that couldn't have been replicated at night on a dirt road.
Because the focus here isn't on the races; it's on the spy stuff. It's when the guns come out. Oh, I just remember, by the way, I was going to mention this a while ago. The best part of that train scene is the end of it, when McMissow's like, how about some weapons, Mater? And just reveals the entire wall of guns. I love that bit. Again, wouldn't it be funny in any other movie, but it's in a Cars movie, it's hilarious.
I will agree with you on that one. The guns were kind of out of nowhere, but A+.
I just think the fact that this movie gives Mater guns to use is just, in general, this movie, whenever it like goes hyper violent, this is amazing. Like, why? How are they at the studio being like, this is what our Cars sequel should be about? A spy movie. Okay, let's give Mater guns. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Between Cars 1 and Cars 2, I did look up some Larry the Cable Guy comedy movies. He's just so baffling to me because I do really like the character of Mater. And on my second watch of Cars 2, a lot of these jokes were more frustrating because I think they're overshadowed by the deadness of the rest of the movie. And even in the comedy scenes, I think you're always aware of like the yawning chasms of emptiness behind the characters. There's something about that. The Cars 2 just feels very like unalive. But I'm just having these thoughts about Larry the Cable Guy because I'm like, man, his raunchy stuff just does not do it for for me at all. But the idea that there is this folksy tractor guy who just doesn't know his way around the world is so appealing to me. It's wild that these two characters can exist in the same person and seem to not interact with each other at all. He seems like he can be such a clown and in like a kid-friendly way, but that's not what any of his live stuff is. I find his live stuff a little like underproduced, but that's kind of Cars 2 adjacent, I guess. I don't know if you guys have also done the supplementary readings on Larry the Cable.
I've never seen Larry the Cable Guy in a non-Mater role. Mater's the one role that I will ever watch him in, unless I someday watch The Tooth Fairy 2.
Wasn't the first Tooth Fairy like The Rock or something?
It's The Rock in the first Tooth Fairy. Julie Andrews gives him the job as Tooth Fairy in it. So the sequel should hypothetically be The Rock gives us to Larry the Cable Guy, but unfortunately it was just they couldn't get The Rock to come back, or Julie Andrews, I think, so they just gave it to Larry the Cable Guy. They're like, here you go, man. And they're like, yeah, okay.
Luke, I wanted to ask you, now I do want to ask about your car watching experience. Why were these races frustrating?
Okay, first off, you would never race a closed wheel stock car against an open wheel formula car. Like, those are completely incompatible in racing. The way they drive is completely different. The type of tracks you would drive them on, it's not the same. Second off, they have these courses that are like off-road and like all these, literally if you like drove a Formula 1 car on dirt, it would like explode. Like the wheels would literally get a whole bunch of dirt and grit in them and just shred apart. Like you cannot do that. The NASCAR would probably not have the same steering as like a rally car would. So if there's anything technical, most likely that NASCAR is still going to lose time in every single corner to like a rally car. But a rally car would be set up for the dirt and not for the gravel, so then it would just shed and bleed time all over the asphalt. One thing that was really confusing to me was the way that they started these races, right? So in most racing, you have qualifying, right? Where you go one lap and see who can go the fastest. And I would assume that Francesco Bernoulli, he and Lightning, I assume, are the two fastest cars around the track. So realistically, they should always be the first two cars on the grid. However, we see in the first race, we see them in reverse order. So Bernoulli is actually all the way at the end, and then Lightning is second to last. So that means that they would then have to pass everyone, which is very opposite from like any racing that I know of.
It's more cinematic though.
It is. Like, it's one of those things where like it makes sense in my brain that you started that way, but it's not the way that it actually starts. Now, we move on to the Italy one, which they're just trying to make it look like the Monaco Grand Prix. Is what that's supposed to look like. And it's the opposite. Bernoulli and Lightning are at the front of the grid now. So did they swap the way that they're qualifying? Like, what's going on that we're not seeing? Did they like have to take engine penalties at the beginning? And like, I'm just very confused by that. And then we don't see the grid for the third race in England, which I was very surprised that was like around London and not around like Silverstone, which is like the really famous British Formula 1 track.
Well, they gotta have the Queen show up, so that's why it's in England.
Yeah, but like, why was it in London and not on like an actual? I don't know.
Oh, I think it's because they wanted to have Big Ben there, but I also I kind of feel like if they had it on a real track, it would be more compelling because then you have to get from Big Ben all the way to this real track.
Yeah, so we don't see the grid there, but also like we don't really see that race at all. Except for when they try to death ray Lightning. That's about all we actually see of it. Then, when they're at the end at the Radiator Springs Grand Prix or whatever, they're in reverse order again with Bernoulli and Lightning at the back. So I'm just very confused about why that's not consistent and why it is that way. And I'm sure someone along the line made that decision.
Do they say the last one's official? I felt like the last one was meant to be like an unofficial makeup race type of thing. I didn't feel like it was... They just all have their paint jobs from it still. And in that case, it would make sense for Lightning and Bernoulli to want to be in the back because they want to show off their butts to each other.
Yeah, but like, I think they're both such professionals that they would want it to be as legit as possible. And if you've flown like the 20 other cars there all the way to Radiator Springs. Like, I don't know, that's a lot of money to just like go putz around a little course. Like, it seems like in this gray area of like being legit and not being legit. Like, I feel like the result is legit, even if it's not like on the same like publicity level. But I don't know. We don't actually see them racing. We just see them doing like a parade lap or something. Also, I felt that like the only race where we see them do more than one lap is the first race. We see the bridge section, I think, twice in Monaco, but we never see a single lap of the third race. And we only see them cross the finish line twice in the first race. So how many laps are these? Like, are these endurance races? Are these sprint races? Like, what are these? I'm very, very confused.
Especially because I think, like, obviously Cars 1 handles this really well. And we know from, like, The Phantom Menace that you can create drama across multiple laps. So I guess maybe it is because Cars 2 isn't about the races. But I also have this gripe with it. Just when you sit down and think about it, it's like there's nothing really there. Like, there's no sense of drama because it's a race without drama, or it's a race that doesn't set up anything to let there be drama.
I kept being like, I want to see more of this race. Like, this race actually seems kind of interesting. I have a lot of questions, and then there's just nothing. Maybe there's a way to have done it better, but I don't know. I wanted to see more racing. It's about cars, and cars go around in circles, like vroom vroom.
Did you guys hear about our race in Chicago?
Didn't it get rained out?
Yeah, it was really funny. Everyone I know has been complaining about it for months because it's like, why are we doing that? That's so dumb. And then it got rained out, so everyone was happy, but also annoyed because it's like everything still got shut down just for it to just get rained out.
You had a car race in Chicago?
Yeah, they closed a bunch of the streets so we could have a car race.
Yeah, it was supposed to be like NASCAR's first street race, which actually sounds kind of cool. Like, I don't care about NASCAR, but like, I probably might have like watched the highlights for it.
Yeah, I saw some of it in a bar on Saturday. And it did look kind of cool, but it was also just like, this is stupid. Like, the damage to the city on a holiday weekend is not worth the gain of tourism it got. Because it's not like Chicago's a really big, it's people aren't really going to come in for that. Especially when there's nowhere to park their own car. I don't know. I don't know. I just had that on my list of things to bring up because city street races. And that's what this movie ends up being, basically. They're not really courses. They're not race courses. They're street courses.
I have to wonder what some of my students think about this movie, because they probably grew up with it a bit more than we did, like in that background noise sort of way.
I had a moment at work earlier where I felt old this week. Now, I always feel old at work, but I have a coworker who's pretty cool. She's, I think, 21. She started working here last summer. She's 20 last summer. She's 21 this year. And I'm just playing the Disney playlist, and I see the light from Tangled comes up, and she's like, this is great. It's a classic. I'm like, yeah, it is. And I was like, wait a second. This movie came out when I was a freshman in high school. And she's like, well, what year was that? And I'm like, 2010. She's like, I guess I saw this when I was 8 years old. And I was like, I don't like knowing that. That makes me feel very weird about this conversation because I feel like we're talking on the same level here, but I'm way older than you.
Well, that's life.
I don't know, but like when specifically we talk about like the movies that define us, Tangled to me, always feels like to me like this is the return of Disney of what they had when I was a kid. But then it's like, no, this is just Disney when I was a kid. And I'm like, oh my god, like it's weird to think about.
I got that feeling when someone I was around was like, I'm so glad that Infinity War is coming out because now I can see those characters I grew up with, like Iron Man, finally have the end of their story. And I'm like, wow, I don't feel like I grew up with Iron Man. I feel like I wasn't actually that old when I saw Iron Man, but I definitely don't feel like he's like my childhood character that I get to watch the end of his story or whatever. No matter what you feel about Cars 2, it has put us in the mood to watch Cars 3, another movie about the passage of time.
I hate Cars 3.
The manager at the liquor store that I was working at last night said that Cars 3 was peak.
I watched Lightning McQueen's death scene last night. It was pretty rad.
We didn't talk about the best joke of the movie, which is when it's not even a joke. It's more like a disturbing bit of body horror. Just when Mater runs into the person who has eyeballs where their headlights should be.
Oh, yeah.
It's very disturbing.
Clearly, Lasseter had a lot of beef with people who hated cars.
He had to get out of his chest. He's like, this joke has to be in the movie or I'm out. Or else I'm canceling the movie.
What are more ways that you can defend Cars 2 to us?
As I've already said, it's funny, violent, it's got a great Michael Giacchino score. which we haven't talked about. It's fantastic. They should bring him back for Cars 2 too. That's my big pitch always, I say, is that Cars 4 needs to only follow Cars 2 in the same way Cars 3 completely ignores that Cars 2 happened. Cars 4 needs to only acknowledge the second film. But Cars 2 is art. It is art in the way bad stuff can be art, because it is a well-made film in technique, but in story structure and in voice acting and in everything we think of when we think of Pixar to be great, it fails at. But all the aesthetic goodness is there. It's just shot. It's a lemon of a movie, right?
I guess. I don't even think the aesthetic goodness is there. This movie looks like a level in Lego Star Wars.
The wasabi looks delicious.
It doesn't look like wasabi. They didn't, like, get the texture of wasabi right. I don't know. That's like a small thing, but now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, why couldn't they get the texture of the wasabi right?
It wasn't quite viscous enough. It was a little too liquidy when he like scooped it out and plopped it there. Like the first little bits, it's like, okay, that looks right. And then he like, this, it's way too wet.
I thought the Cars beer looked good, except whenever they splashed the foam on it for people, that looked really bad. Mark, I'm gonna refer back to something you sent me, and I texted you. I texted, very much looking forward to discussing the life lessons of this film, and you said, no matter what, you can get a British girlfriend, which I think is a very key part of this movie too, which is that they have absolutely no chemistry at all. She's constantly teaching Mater what to do, and at the end, she's still like, hey Mater, I'm glad I'm your girlfriend. And it's like, great. I'm glad this movie that made her be so dumb and do everything wrong, and it rewards him by giving him a person. It does not reward him by giving him and rockets. They give him rockets, and he gets to be in a relationship with someone.
On some level, I really appreciated that he like gets the girl at the end, but it also is kind of like there's no chemistry there. There's very little chemistry between anyone in this movie, particularly the two of them.
I think there's chemistry between Lightning and Francesco. I can see something there.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah. They're constantly tattooing each other's names on their butts. It's pretty romantic. I can see it. Mark's like, I don't condone this. I do not condone this.
I don't know. I think that like the voice acting / voice direction was really subpar as well. And I just don't think I don't think it helps anyone except for John Turturro, who doesn't really need to connect with people. I think that's maybe why I am on the side of like this is a good John Turturro appearance, because by him being crazy, he doesn't fall into like needing to connect with other people.
I do like the Bruce Campbell cameo. I think that's the other actor I like singling out here. Bruce Campbell as the American agent who gets killed on screen.
I did have a thought that I think that, you know, you can think of like what is an American actor, and I think I was looking this up, just curious, like what then they talk about like what actors are the most popular American actors, but that's not really what I mean when I think of like American actor. I think Bruce Campbell is the person who is like the actor who is most American, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a moment in Asteroid City where Matt Dillon shows up, and I've seen a lot of people on Twitter be like, I thought he was Bruce Campbell for a second. And I'm like, it's because he's playing Bruce Campbell. Like, he's playing a Bruce Campbell-esque role. Luke, what's your opinion on Bruce Campbell?
I had to Google who Bruce Campbell is.
Well, you're a big fan of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies, so you see him around. He's in a lot. He's the guy who goes, Spider-Man? That's like Arachnid. That's a dumb name. It's Amazing Spider-Man. He's the lobby guy in the second one. He's like, you can't come in late to the play. And in the third one, he's the French waiter, which is the only memorable role he has to give him, really. Because it's probably the only thing in that movie everyone universally likes. How does this movie make us feel about Pixar?
Honestly, I felt the way most people feel about this movie when I saw Toy Story 3, so I'm pretty much in the same place that I was. Like, I saw the writing on the wall. I was expecting this, and this is exactly the same kind of thing we've been watching in our Shorts episodes for a while. So I'm like, yeah, what were you all expecting?
I feel like this movie lives large enough in my brain with Pixar that it hasn't changed my thoughts all that much. And even at the time, I'm not sure that it might have altered it. Of course, like, it was that first one that just really was not super solid. I don't know how much it moves the needle for me, though.
I mean, I think it goes back to what I said at the beginning. It's accidental self-parody by Pixar. It shows you how the formula can backfire, and in a way, to me, it's very endearing because this is the first. I know, Mark, you already said like Toy Story 3 already showed this, but I think this is the first real sign that like the formula is not always going to pay off. I think it's a very charming movie in that sense, where it's like its failures make it likable. It's hard not to root for this movie once it's clear how wrong-headed it is. And I think it becomes pretty clear how wrong-headed it is. Like in the first scene, it's like the last movie was a nice little movie about someone learning to slow down and appreciate the finer things. Is like movie opens with a distress call from a British agent about to be killed. Like as soon as the logo ends, like it's pretty clear immediately this isn't gonna work. And I find it weirdly endearing that no one at Pixar was like, we need to completely restart this movie. They kept going, no, the spy stuff will work. It's going to work. And then it never did, obviously.
I guess encouraging to know that even at the level of Pixar, you still have higher up creatives being like, no, I know this has never worked when we're the audience, but surely when we put this in front of someone, they will respond differently as though it is suddenly good.
There was this recent expos at inverse.com about Elemental and how like Elemental is bombing and like the people at Pixar, what they blame it on. And there's like one, they always get like a quote from one person that's like, this isn't really the attitude of studio. This is like one person in the studio. And one person's like, well, the issue is Pete Docter isn't too hard on the movies. Lightyear wouldn't have happened under John Lasseter. I don't know. Cars 2 happened under John Lasseter. So I don't really think we can just say that John Lasseter would have been like, nah, Lightyear can't. This can't be put out because he put out Cars 2, right? I think Cars 2 is more obviously not working than Lightyear ever is, and I don't like Lightyear. I mean, I don't like Lightyear because to me it's boring bad. It's not like this where it's fascinating.
I kind of wonder if is Steve Jobs dead yet in the timeline?
If he's not dead, he's really sick right now because Brave is dedicated to Steve Jobs, so I think he's not dead yet. But I think he dies in October. This came out in June.
I guess that kind of throws a wrench into my theory that maybe he was a more influential producer force.
What I find really interesting about the production timeline is that Brad Lewis, who's the producer of Ratatouille, is working on this since 2008. Then in 2010, when Toy Story is coming out, they announced John Lasseter's taking over as director. So you'd think, like, John Lasseter already did the thing with Toy Story 2, right? They couldn't do that with Cars 2, I guess. And it's just really interesting that, like, he seems to end up, and I'm not defending John Lasseter, we all talk about how he's a terrible person for a lot of reasons, but it's weird that he seems to, like, be the fall guy for this, but it's also, like, he had a year to fix it, which he'd done before. And I say this all with love, because I do think I enjoy Cars 2 more than Cars 1. I stick by that. I think it's a much more enjoyable film to watch. I laugh a lot doing it, and if I'm not engaged, you can be on your phone for, like, 5 minutes and be right back into it, and you're back into the fun stuff.
It's also, this movie is about 80 million more expensive than Cars was, so it's almost you can fact check me on this, Danny, but it's like an entire movie more expensive than the first one. And I wonder if maybe because of the behemoth of the whole thing, maybe there's something because Toy Story 2 was originally supposed to be a direct-to-video product, and then it got bigger. Maybe there's something in that. I don't know.
You were talking about the score, and I want to disagree. I remember getting to the end and being like, oh, there was a score? I don't know. Nothing stood out to me.
Oh, the main theme is so good. It's like it's just like it's like the Monsters kind of. It's
I'm so bad at actually like paying attention to scores in movies, and maybe that's it, but nothing jumped out at me with it. So I'm sorry, I have to disagree with your take on the score. It just seemed very much like it was a job that he did.
I mean, he was busy this summer. He did Super 8, and then he also did Mission Impossible for the winter. So he was busy.
Yeah, like it just seemed very much like a job that paid the bills but was not particularly inspired.
I'm on the same page with you, Luke. I mean, Danny, I know you're a big Giacchino fan, but he doesn't, like, reach me.
Oh, I'm not a big Giacchino.
Okay, well, never mind. I guess that this was all a ruse.
Can I read some lyrics from the end credits song?
You may.
Okay. It opens with, as I said, it talks about coffee and tea, but I just want to read this lyric, this stanza. Abbey Road, Route 66, CIA to the MI6, right and left ring, metric imperial, pounds, dollars, howdy cheerio.
We are different but the same.
That's real. That's history right there. Now, before we move on, I do want to mention one last joke. Are you bothered by the Ratatouille reference? Because I was. Not because... So, they go to France, and so, of course, we're going to cut to Gusteau as a car, right? That's just the obvious joke to do. But it's gas toes. It's two separate puns. I think they should have picked one and just gone with it.
I think this is totally fair.
I think they should have gone with the gas one also, not the toe one, because the toe one is too obvious.
I feel like if you lead with Gasteau, it's not as immediate as Gusteau's. I feel like you immediately get that joke and you can move on, but I think Gasteau that's not what his name was. Much. It was Gusteau. Like, just, why do you have to
Luke,
change
what's your
the
opinion?
syllable?
It's been a long time since I watched Ratatouille, so I didn't catch it, and I'm ashamed to admit that. I didn't catch it, and therefore have no opinion on the matter.
So, hello everyone. Danny's computer completely crashed. He's now coming to us through his phone, and we have to finish this episode now. So, thank you all for joining us.
Wait, we have to say what we'd give it. We can still do the end segments.
We always like to give the film something, like normal reviewers give a film stars or numbers or things like that, but we like to give the film something like a present, like a physical object that says how we feel about it. I'm going to give this film a collection of Three Stooges DVDs, but like it's been like lost in a swamp for many years. And I've pulled it out, and I'm just handing it this mossy, swampy set of DVDs.
That is so poetic and visceral, and in a way, beautiful and violent. I appreciate that.
Yeah, Danny does relevant things, but that's not my way.
Oh, don't worry. This week I don't have anything relevant. I know I'm going to give it. I'm giving it tickets to performances in 2018 of Hamilton in Chicago, because a long time ago, I wrote a film for that game I used to play called Johnny Yes Papa, Making Movie No Papa, Buy Tickets Now, Ha Ha Ha, something like that. I don't remember the whole title. But Mater was in it. Mater was a spy in it. And Mater was grave robbing it as a spy. And the plot of it was Mater needed to get tickets to Hamilton. And I felt bad that he never got the tickets. So I will give him tickets to Hamilton now.
So mine is my Mini Cooper engine melting on the way back from Danny's play as Danny was in the car with me, and we pulled over to the side of the road and it died and was totaled and never drove again is what I'm giving to Cars 2.
Thank you all for joining us for Cars 2. And thank you, Luke, for being here. You've been such a great guest, and it's been wonderful to have you.
Thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Do you have like an Instagram where you want people to follow you, or socials or anything like that?
I have one Instagram. I'm a choir teacher. So it is Mr.Hayden1. And I'll be entirely honest, I actually post stuff on, I don't post anything on like my actual socials. So just follow there. You can see me as I'm putting on productions, stuff like that. Yeah, follow me on there if you want. If not, don't.
All right. So, Danny, what are we going to talk about next time?
We already talked about it, but Mark still got to edit it. There was another spy movie that came out in 2011 that's related to Pixar, and that is from director Brad Bird, who met Tom Cruise and made Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, our next detour. As I said, we've already done this episode, but it's really good. I think it's a really good episode. At least the guests did. I don't know about Mark and me, but the guests are pretty good.
These are probably the most special guests that we've ever had.
Yeah, sorry, Luke.
I'm sure they're really special, so no offense taken.
Looking for the Ocean is produced by Mark Young and Danny Vincent.
The show is edited by Mark Young.
Our original artwork was designed by Sarah Knopf.
You can follow us on social media at Looking for the Ocean, Instagram at Looking for the Ocean Pod, and Twitter at Pixar Journey, and on our website at lookingfortheoceanpixar.podbean.com.
You can follow me, Mark, on markyoungperformer.com. I hope by the time this episode comes out, I actually have a link to this podcast on my website. That's something that I should do. And also on my socials. I'm still in a play.
You can follow me, Danny, at Blankets on Letterboxd. I just put up my Wes Anderson list. Come fight me about it. You can listen to my other podcast, The Snub Club, where we talk about the movies that the most Oscar nominations and no wins. Thanks again, Luke, for coming on.
My pleasure.